Elvis stopped the show, dropped his guitar, and told 20,000 fans to shut their mouths because of one man in a wheelchair. Now, before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, this story goes places you will not expect, I need you to understand something. This wasn't some PR stunt. This wasn't some scripted moment designed to sell records. What happened that night almost destroyed Elvis Presley's career, and he did it anyway. If stories like this move you, if you believe the world needs to hear more about moments where someone famous actually risked everything to do the right thing, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this channel is built on exactly those kinds of stories, the ones history tried to bury. Now let me take you back. It was the summer of 1971. Elvis Presley was performing at a packed arena in the American South. The venue was electric. Over 20,000 fans had crammed themselves into every available seat, some of them driving hundreds of miles just to see the King perform live. Tickets had sold out in under 4 hours. Local radio stations had been counting down the days for weeks. But the atmosphere that night wasn't just excitement. There was an edge to it. You have to understand what America felt like in 1971. The Vietnam War was tearing the country apart. Young men were coming home broken, physically, mentally, spiritually, and half the nation didn't even want to look at them. Soldiers who had sacrificed everything were being spat on in airports. Veterans who had lost limbs were being told the war they fought in was shameful. The country that sent them to die couldn't even say thank you when they came back. And one of those veterans was sitting in the 4th row that night. His name, and we'll call him Robert because his family has asked for some privacy even decades later. Robert had served 2 tours in Vietnam. He was 26 years old. He had once been a high school quarterback with a full scholarship waiting for him. Fast, strong, full of life, the kind of kid everyone in his small town expected to become something great. Instead, he came home in a wheelchair. A landmine outside Da Nang had taken both his legs below the knee. He'd spent 11 months in a military hospital. He'd watched 3 of his closest friends die in the jungle, and when he finally returned to his hometown, nobody threw a parade. Nobody even came to the airport. But Robert loved Elvis. Always had. Before the war, he used to play Elvis records in his bedroom so loud his mother would bang on the ceiling with a broom handle. He knew every word to every song. And when his sister surprised him with front-row tickets to this concert, the first time he'd left the house for anything other than a doctor's appointment in over a year, Robert cried. He actually cried. His sister helped him into the arena that night. She pushed his wheelchair through the crowded entrance while people shoved past them without a second glance. She positioned him near the end of the 4th row, close to the aisle, where the wheelchair could fit without blocking anyone. Robert wore his military jacket, not to make a statement. He wore it because it was the only jacket that still fit right, and because somewhere deep inside, he still believed the country he'd bled for might one day acknowledge what he gave. He had no idea what was about to happen. The lights dropped and the arena erupted. Elvis walked out in one of his iconic jumpsuits, white with gold trim, cape flowing behind him like he owned gravity itself. The band launched into the opening number and the building shook. Women screamed, men cheered. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks across the darkened seats. Elvis was magnificent that night. Everyone who was there would later agree on that. His voice was sharp, powerful, full of that raw emotional depth that separated him from every other performer alive. He moved across the stage with confidence, engaging the crowd, pointing at fans, dropping to one knee during ballads while women in the front rows literally reached toward him with trembling hands. Song after song landed perfectly. The setlist was flawless. The band was tight. The energy in the building kept climbing higher and higher until the whole arena felt like a single living organism breathing together in rhythm. Robert sat in his wheelchair, smiling wider than he had smiled in over a year. His sister later said she looked over at him during Love Me Tender and saw tears on his cheeks, but his face was pure joy. For those few minutes, he wasn't a wounded veteran forgotten by his country. He was just a kid from a small town listening to his hero sing. And then the moment shattered. Between songs, as the band transitioned, a commotion broke out near Robert's section. A group of men, 4 or 5 of them, mid-20s, clearly intoxicated, had been getting louder throughout the show. Laughing too hard, shouting crude things, pushing boundaries the way drunk men do when they think the crowd makes them invisible. One of them noticed Robert. Noticed the wheelchair, noticed the military jacket, noticed the folded pant legs where legs should have been. And this man, this drunk, reckless, cruel man, said something so vile that the people sitting nearby physically recoiled. He called Robert a cripple, but that wasn't all. He told Robert he was taking up space real people could use. He said soldiers who came back broken should have stayed over there. He laughed while he said it. His friends laughed, too. The words carried. In a brief gap between songs, with the arena quieter than usual, those words traveled further than the man probably intended. Robert's sister stood up immediately, shaking with fury. An older gentleman nearby told the drunk man to shut his mouth. A woman 2 seats over covered her child's ears, but the damage was already done. Robert didn't move. He didn't respond. He just sat there, and something behind his eyes, that fragile, hopeful light that the music had briefly rekindled, went dark. He had heard worse. That was the devastating part. He had heard worse from strangers on the street, from teenagers at the grocery store, from people who had never worn a uniform in their lives. He was used to it. And being used to it was the most heartbreaking thing of all. Now here's where the story turns. Because somehow, and multiple witnesses confirmed this independently, Elvis heard it. Maybe it was a monitor picking up crowd noise. Maybe someone near the stage relayed it. Maybe Elvis, who was known for watching his audiences with almost predatory attention, simply saw the disturbance and read the body language. However it happened, Elvis became aware that a man in a wheelchair wearing a military jacket had just been publicly humiliated in his arena. And Elvis Presley stopped the show. Not gradually, not after finishing the song, he stopped cold. He held up one hand toward the band, and the music died mid-measure. The sudden silence was jarring, almost violent in its abruptness. 20,000 people who had been swaying and singing suddenly froze, confused, alarmed. Elvis stood at the edge of the stage, microphone in hand, staring into the 4th row area with an expression that people later described as terrifying. Not because he looked angry in a loud way, because he looked angry in a quiet way. The kind of anger that doesn't yell, the kind that burns slow and cuts deep. The arena went so silent, you could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents. Elvis raised the microphone slowly. "I'm going to need the house lights up," he said. The lighting crew hesitated. This was completely off script. Colonel Parker backstage reportedly started moving toward the wings with panic on his face. But someone hit the switch, and fluorescent light flooded the arena, exposing every face, every expression, every person who suddenly had nowhere to hide. Elvis looked out across the crowd and spoke in a voice that was low, measured, and absolutely devastating. "There's a man sitting in this audience tonight," Elvis said, "who gave more for this country than most of us will ever understand. He went where his nation asked him to go. He paid a price none of us in this building should ever have to pay, and he came here tonight to my show to hear some music and feel some joy." He paused. The silence was suffocating. And somebody in this arena just tried to take that from him. You could hear a pin drop. 20,000 people were frozen in their seats, some with hands over their mouths, some looking around trying to understand what had happened. Elvis's jaw tightened. "I want to say something, and I want every person in this building to hear me clearly. That man in the wheelchair is not taking up anyone's space. He earned his seat. He earned it with blood. He earned it with sacrifice. He earned it in ways that should make every single one of us ashamed for not doing more." His voice cracked slightly on the word, ashamed, and people in the front rows later said they could see moisture gathering in his eyes. Then Elvis pointed toward the section where the drunk men were sitting. "And whoever thinks it's funny to mock a man who fought for your freedom to sit here, to drink your beer, to enjoy this show in a country that's still standing because men like him held the line, you don't deserve to be in this building." The drunk men had gone pale. The laughter had evaporated. One of them was already pushing toward the aisle, head down, trying to disappear. Another sat frozen, mouth slightly open, suddenly looking very, very sober. "Get out," Elvis said, not screaming, almost whispering. "Get out of my show." Security moved in fast. The men were escorted out, not violently, but firmly, surrounded by guards who walked them through the exits while nearby audience members watched in stunned silence. One of the drunk men tried to protest, and a security guard simply pointed toward the door without breaking stride. They were gone within 90 seconds. But Elvis wasn't finished. He looked back toward Robert, sitting in his wheelchair in the 4th row. Their eyes met. And what happened next is what broke the arena completely. Elvis set his microphone down on the stage. He walked to the edge, and then Elvis Presley climbed down from the stage. The crowd gasped. This did not happen at concerts. Superstars did not leave the stage. Security panicked. Colonel Parker reportedly grabbed someone's arm so hard he left bruises, but nobody stopped Elvis because nobody could have. He walked through the front row, past stunned fans who reached toward him and then pulled back when they realized this wasn't performance. This was personal. Elvis moved directly to Robert's wheelchair. And he knelt down. The king of rock and roll knelt down in front of a wounded veteran in a wheelchair, took the man's hand, and said something that no microphone picked up. Whatever words passed between them in that moment belonged only to the two of them. Robert's sister later said her brother's face crumbled, not in sadness, but in something beyond sadness. Relief, maybe, recognition, the feeling of being seen by another human being after months of feeling invisible. Elvis stayed there for what witnesses estimated was nearly 2 full minutes. He didn't rush. He didn't pose. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at Robert. Then Elvis stood up, squeezed Robert's shoulder, and turned back toward the stage. And that's when the arena exploded. Not with music, with emotion. 20,000 people rose to their feet simultaneously. The applause was deafening, not concert applause, not entertainment applause, but the deep, thundering, almost desperate applause of people who had just witnessed something they knew they would remember for the rest of their lives. People were weeping openly. Men who hadn't cried in decades stood with tears streaming down their faces, clapping until their hands burned. Strangers hugged each other. A woman near the back later told a newspaper reporter that she grabbed a complete stranger and sobbed into his shoulder, and neither of them felt embarrassed about it. The ovation lasted over 4 minutes. Robert sat in his wheelchair in the middle of it all, and for the first time since he'd come home from Vietnam, he didn't look broken. He looked seen. Elvis climbed back on stage, grabbed the microphone, and without any transition, without any speech, launched into an American trilogy. The song that wove together Dixie, the battle hymn of the Republic, and All My Trials. A song about a divided nation trying desperately to find its way back to unity. The performance that followed was, by every account, the most emotionally charged of Elvis's entire career. His voice carried a rawness that went beyond technique. The band played with tears in their eyes. Backup singers struggled to hold their harmonies together through the emotion. And the audience sang along with a ferocity that shook the walls. When the final note faded, the arena stood again. Another ovation, longer this time, louder. Elvis left the stage that night drenched in sweat, visibly exhausted, emotionally spent. Backstage, band members said he sat alone for a long time. He didn't celebrate. He didn't joke around. He just sat there, staring at his hands like a man processing the weight of what he'd done and what it meant. Colonel Parker was furious. There were concerns about headlines, backlash, accusations of political grandstanding. Parker understood the entertainment business as a machine, and machines didn't benefit from unpredictability. But Elvis didn't care. Reports from people close to him said that when Parker confronted him about the risks, Elvis responded with something short and final. "That boy fought for this country. The least I could do was fight for him for 2 minutes." Parker never brought it up again. In the days that followed, the story spread not through major news coverage, because media in 1971 didn't work the way it does now, but through word of mouth. People who were there told friends. Those friends told family. Letters arrived at Graceland from veterans across the country, thanking Elvis for acknowledging their sacrifice when it felt like nobody else would. Robert's sister wrote Elvis a letter 2 weeks later. She told him that her brother had started leaving the house more. He'd gone to a diner for the first time in months. He'd called an old friend he hadn't spoken to since before the war. She didn't attribute all of it to one concert. Recovery doesn't work that way. But she said something shifted inside Robert that night. Something that had been locked away started to open again. She said Elvis gave her brother permission to believe he still mattered. Elvis reportedly kept that letter in his desk at Graceland until the day he died. And here's what strikes me most about this story. Elvis Presley was a man with extraordinary power, fame, wealth, influence beyond what most humans will ever experience. He could have used that power to protect himself, to stay safe, to keep the show running smoothly and let security handle the disturbance quietly. Instead, he used that power the only way it truly matters. He gave it away. He gave it to a man who had none, a forgotten veteran in a wheelchair who the world had stopped looking at. And for a few minutes inside that arena, Elvis made sure every single person in the building looked. That's not entertainment. That's not showmanship. That's humanity at its most raw and most beautiful. You know, we live in a world now where moments like this get filmed, uploaded, debated, and forgotten within 48 hours. Content moves so fast that genuine courage gets buried under noise. But some moments deserve to live longer than an algorithm allows. This is one of them. Elvis Presley wasn't a perfect man. Nobody who studies his life honestly would claim otherwise. He had flaws, contradictions, struggles that followed him to an early grave. But on that night in 1971, in front of 20,000 witnesses, he chose the harder right over the easier wrong. And he did it without hesitation. Robert passed away in 1994. His sister confirmed that he kept his ticket stub from that concert in a frame on his bedroom wall for the rest of his life. Not because Elvis was famous, because Elvis saw him. Sometimes that's all any of us really need, to be seen. If this story moved you, if you think more people need to hear it, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that courage still exists. Drop a comment below telling me about a moment when someone stood up for you or when you stood up for someone else. I read every single comment, and those stories matter just as much as the one I just told you. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit that bell so you never miss a video, and I'll see you in the next one. Because history is full of moments like this, and I'm just getting started telling them.